There is a perceived war against men, with masculinity reportedly in decline across various demographics, irrespective of race, nation, or creed. This is widely acknowledged. Within this context, the black man has suffered the most damage and faced the most direct attacks. This unspoken war has been waged against black men for many generations, and as a black person myself, I find it imperative to address this issue. Recent movies released in the past few years have depicted women warriors as being equally strong as, if not stronger than men. For instance, Black Panther 2 prominently featured women in its trailer, reminiscent of the first movie where the king was protected by a female army. It showcased female warriors, with a scene explicitly demonstrating a woman's strength surpassing that of a man. Additionally, there is evidence that the government has subtly acted against black men in the United States without openly admitting to doing so. This is inferred from the observation that many black women have been appointed to high positions, with an implied criteria being that they are not married to black men. There have been articles suggesting that more black women should consider marrying white men, which incidentally reduces the black family unit over generations. In the black community, many of our heroes today are actors, singers, rappers, athletes, and social activists. However, there is a perception that they have been emasculated by the powers that be or are homosexual, leaving no space for traditional black men today. There is a widespread all-out assault on black men, a topic that is difficult to discuss without being labeled sexist, racist, homophobic, or a combination of these. Our current black culture in America has been deliberately crafted to portray the black man as subdued, and it is crucial to recognize this at this juncture. To gain a better understanding of our current situation, it's helpful to look back in history. After the abolition of slavery, black Americans sought to build lives for themselves. The Great Migration, one of the largest movements of people in U.S. history, saw approximately 6 million black individuals move from the American South to the North, Midwest, and West from the 1910s through the 1970s. This migration was driven by the desire to escape racial violence and seek better economic and educational opportunities. The first wave of the Great Migration, from 1910 to 1940, saw black Southerners moving to northern and Midwestern cities like New York, Chicago, and Detroit. It's important to note that during these times, the black family unit was statistically strong. Men moved their families across the country in search of opportunities to support them. Despite facing significant racism and oppression, those with families maintained strong familial bonds. According to data from the United States Census Bureau in 1910, 72.5% of black children were raised in two-parent households, and only 13% were raised by single mothers. In contrast, nearly 90% of white children were raised in two-parent households, with only 5% being raised by single mothers. Although there was a noticeable gap, it was not as significant as the disparity that would emerge over time. Throughout the Great Depression and the First Great Migration, these percentages remained relatively stable, indicating 3 decades of strong family structures with both mothers and fathers present in the home. This period extends back to the era of my great-grandparents, during which black families largely remained intact. However, in the 1960s, just before the Civil Rights Act, these percentages began to shift. The proportion of black children raised in two-parent homes decreased by 5% to 67.7%, while the percentage of black children raised by single mothers increased by 5% to 18.2%. Meanwhile, white families became stronger, with the rate of two-parent households rising above 91%, and the rate of single-mother households remaining at 5%. Over the next 20 years, the black family structure experienced its most significant changes. In the 1980s, during a major recession and the highest point of inflation in the United States, the black family structure saw a dramatic decline. The percentage of black children raised in two-parent homes dropped by 20% to 47.1%, and the percentage of black children raised by single mothers increased by almost 20% to 37.3%. It's important to note that these trends were influenced by external factors, particularly economic conditions, as evidenced by the decline in strong white families as well. The percentage of white two-parent households decreased by 7% to 84%, and the rate of single-mother households grew by 6% to 11.7%. At the same time, nearly 40% of the black community's homes had single mothers at the helm, highlighting a significant shift in family dynamics. One of the most significant challenges for black men in a society that was undermining them was the desire to prove their manhood by fathering a child, yet being denied the economic resources by American society to support that child. The scarcity of economic opportunities led to widespread poverty within the black community.
There's a lot of jobs around though for, just the average person, unskilled. You got to have some kind of skill.
Poverty and the struggle for survival often fuel violence and crime. Many black men, seeing no other options, turn to crime as their only means of making a living. The film Dead Presidents illustrates this narrative effectively, portraying a young man who served in the Vietnam War and returned to a lack of opportunities. Despite his efforts, he couldn't provide for his family, while a local pimp, not reliant on the system, could. This disparity led him to choose a life of crime, a decision that ultimately did not end well for him. With limited opportunities, black men often resorted to crime. Even though white-collar crime was estimated to cost society over $100 billion, about $310 per person in the US a year, compared to $2.5 billion, about $8 per person in the US from street crimes, prisons were disproportionately filled with lower-income black Americans. In the 1970s, whites were incarcerated at a rate of 43.5 per 100,000, while the rate for blacks was 367.5 per 100,000, with black individuals receiving sentences that were on average 20% longer than those of whites. During the same decade, the unemployment rate for blacks soared, as did the prison population, highlighting a direct correlation between a lack of economic opportunities, extreme poverty, and the desperation that led black men to crime. Today, while marijuana can be used freely across the country, there was a time when possession of even an ounce could ruin lives. The laws of that era were designed with specific intentions. Between 1974 and 1977, of all new employees entering the private industry, 53% were white women, 26% were white men, 5% were black women, and black men experienced no net gain in their numbers, underscoring the necessity for laws like affirmative action. The challenges faced by black men in America were not due to a lack of desire or laziness, but were the result of limited opportunities and their struggle to find a place in a society that did not welcome them. The system was not designed with black men in mind, and at no point did it seek to facilitate the thriving of black men unless it conformed to certain stereotypes. Additionally, if they were in poverty and sought welfare, the welfare programs would not assist women who had men in the household. These were known as man-of-the-house rules, aimed at enforcing social norms about who was morally deserving of welfare. The rules stated, "We will tighten welfare and give more attention to outside sources of income when determining the amount of welfare an individual is allowed." These regulations prevented adult males from residing with mothers and children who received assistance, making it more beneficial for a mother to remain unmarried and for a man not to live in their home than for the family to stay together. By the 1980s, more than 50% of black families were fatherless, with black men facing high unemployment rates and a lack of opportunities, a situation created by the system. In black communities in cities like Los Angeles, it's hard to imagine the situation worsening. the unemployment rate among black adults is double the national average. In many places, desperation has turned to hopelessness. While it's easy to simply blame white individuals for these issues, the problem is much deeper than just assigning blame to white people. The history of who we were before our ancestors were taken as slaves has been obscured, and the hatred and oppression we have endured were explained solely based on skin color. But it's important to understand that the issues are much deeper than that.
Let me say that the cross is an inspiration, a sign of the Christian religion.
White power!
White power! White power!
White power! White power!
This oppression and hatred were deeply spiritual, and attributing it solely to white people does not fully illuminate the situation. It merely perpetuates entrapment within the system's mindset and its structural confines. The system was established by individuals with satanic beliefs who harbored a strong animosity towards black men. This lineage was despised, cursed, and as a result, our people were oppressed. The complexity of this issue is vast and cannot be fully explained in this context, but it's crucial to recognize that the enemy is not simply white people as a whole. This perspective does not negate the reality that many within the white community were driven by a spiritual hatred. Black men were shaped by their environments and subjected to emasculation, losing the drive to take responsibility and navigate their circumstances. Instead, they became victims of these circumstances, and any attempt to establish something beyond the system was swiftly crushed and suppressed. It was an exceedingly difficult period for black men, and it is unfair to place blame solely on them during these times of intense oppression and deceit. In the 1980s, the system remained the adversary, fully aware of its actions, and it then sought to redefine the black man. The black community lacked genuine influence, and our real heroes were compromised, whether they were in the church, abandoning biblical teachings for a social gospel, or in the streets, distributing drugs and being paid to internally destroy communities. The government facilitated the introduction of guns and crack into our neighborhoods, leading to their severe decline. With the rise of mass media, the system infiltrated our neighborhoods, selecting our adversaries and elevating them as our heroes. The emergence of gangster rap and hip-hop culture felt authentically ours, but due to a lack of understanding of the system, we did not realize that these presented heroes were merely instruments of the very system we opposed. They utilized our own people as Trojan horses to subdue us. Black culture morphed into hip-hop culture, instilling a level of immaturity in our black men that we are still striving to overcome. For black men, the figures we may have idolized, whose posters adorned our walls, whose videos we watched, whose style we emulated, whose clothing we bought, whose parties we attended, whose lyrics we studied, whose jokes made us laugh, whom we dressed like, and whose values we adopted, claiming we would also strive to make dead presidents represent us. These so-called heroes were, in fact, our adversaries. They don't care about us, they care about themselves. The ease with which they were recruited stems from their proven disregard for others. This is evident in their willingness to sell drugs within their own communities, devastating our mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers without remorse. Similarly, they feel no qualms about becoming celebrities, earning millions by promoting degradation and vice, and we all embraced it. They were enriched at the expense of destroying our communities from within, and we applauded them. With fathers absent from homes, these men became our role models, part of a brilliantly sinister plan against us. Many of us, even into our 40s, still struggle to free ourselves from their influence. Moreover, these men were emasculated and coerced into performing ritualistic homosexual acts as a rite of passage within the system. This explains why many prominent black men have been seen wearing dresses. These black men, whom we elevated as role models and heroes, are complete sellouts, causing harm to us. As black men, It is our duty to protect the next generation, a responsibility we have failed, leading to a younger generation that is even more lost. Now, we have figures like Lil Nas X giving Satan a lap dance, among other concerning developments. Black men in America have been conquered, and it's crucial that you recognize and understand this. You have been subdued and emasculated to the extent that our sons no longer recognize what it means to be a man, becoming completely devoid of traditional masculinity. Women are now perceived as stronger than men, which is reflected in the recent surge of movies about women warriors. The very system you believed you were rebelling against through hip-hop, with groups like NWA promoting aggression against the police, is the same system that ultimately conquered you. You ended up celebrating the sellouts they utilized. There is indeed an agenda focused on emasculation, and it has been specifically targeted at black men, arguably because our strength was perceived as a threat. Understand the strategy they employed. After offering us an illusion of freedom, they enticed us into the system, providing jobs and access to education. They elevated certain controlled bourgeois individuals from our community, setting them as the benchmarks we should aspire to reach. Once these aspirations were ingrained in our minds, they withdrew those very opportunities. They advanced agendas that resulted in the removal of black men from homes, allowing their educational systems and entertainment industry to shape and influence our next generation. They devastated our communities from within by introducing drugs and firearms directly into our neighborhoods. They marked our streets by naming them after Martin Luther King Jr. in every city, not as a tribute to us, but as a signal to themselves, indicating where their targeted attacks were focused, making it known that these are black neighborhoods. Finding the hood in any American city is as simple as locating the MLK boulevards, a deliberate act, not an accident. They enacted laws that led to the incarceration of a disproportionate number of our men, leaving the next generation fatherless and filled with rage. They filled the resulting void with individuals who promoted a lifestyle and mentality that eroded our community from within, stripping away our values. This included disrespecting our women and promoting nearly everything that was detrimental to our well-being, elevating these men as our heroes and societal leaders. We continue to celebrate them today, boasting about their wealth and giving them undue recognition, among other forms of adulation. We are now completely controlled and manipulated, having nurtured a new generation of black men who are uncertain about their identity and role. We see men who are submissive to their women and reluctant to leave their homes, men who fear confronting evil because they dread losing their perceived identity. And now, leadership roles are increasingly occupied by women or gay black men. This situation is the result of a deliberate agenda aimed at neutralizing us, ensuring we pose no threat while manipulating us to channel our energy towards realizing their vision for the world. Despite the significant influence of Black Americans on culture, trends, and social justice, we are merely amplifying the agenda of those who control us. This predicament arose because you, the black man, have been neutralized, conquered, and so thoroughly ensnared that you believe the very mechanisms used against us are our only salvation. Yahushua, the Messiah, is the true solution. If you reject him, understand that the forthcoming times will be dire, and those under this influence will be plunged into chaos. Your families will suffer as a direct consequence if you do not awaken to comprehend who you are, why we have been oppressed, and what our genuine solution is. Failure is imminent. You must break the generational curses that have afflicted the men in your family. Focus not on your father or the other men who have failed to rise. It is imperative that you awaken and embody what the world, our women, our children, our community, and our Creator, the Most High, demand of us. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became older, I put away childish things. This passage from 1 Corinthians 13:11 is shared to emphasize the necessity of abandoning juvenile behaviors and thoughts. As a black man, you are under attack, and although there is little we can do alone to alter this trajectory, we have the opportunity to rectify our mistakes and those of our ancestors and predecessors. You must embody a man who navigates life with strength, not weakness. Stand firm in your faith. Be courageous and strong. Let all your actions be guided by love. This is the essence of 1 Corinthians 16:13, 14. I understand that some of you might think, he was making sense until he started talking about religion. He's using the Bible. He's controlled. Let me clarify. I am not one of those sellout pastors. If you grasp the depth of what I was saying before I cited Scripture, humble yourself. Consider that there might be deeper truths here than what you've perceived on the surface. If the Bible troubles you, it's likely because you're grappling with an identity crisis and don't truly know yourself. You're under the influence of mind control and need awakening. We no longer have the luxury of time. It's time to stand upright and be who God intended us to be. Like the prodigal son, you've been led astray by the ungodly. It's time to return home and submit to Jah. Remember this: blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the way of sinners, nor sit in the seat of mockers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever he does prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. That's Psalm 1, 1-6. I've shared a lot here, and there's much more that could be said, but these words needed to be spoken. I hope they reach and resonate with those for whom they are intended. My motivation for speaking out is my care for you, your family, and our community. I cannot remain silent while witnessing the provocations against black men. It's disheartening to see friends acknowledge these truths, yet skirt around the solutions. These messages needed to be conveyed, and I hope they have struck a chord with you. If you're already awakened and living as a true man of Yahusha, please share this message with those who may have lost their way. It's time to abandon the falsehoods of youth and turn to Yahusha with a full heart and spirit. Be a man of respect and honor. You have been called. The only question is, will you answer? Be ready, be blessed.